Moments ago, chaos erupted across the British media landscape as one of the most shocking confrontations in recent memory unfolded. Katie Hopkins, fresh from a high-profile police clearance that stunned the nation, went on an unrelenting, blistering attack against Holly Willoughby, the beloved television figure, and Jeremy Vine, the long-standing voice of morning debates. Within hours, social media exploded, trending hashtags igniting a storm of outrage, disbelief, and fierce debate. The nation watched in stunned silence as statements that would normally be whispered behind closed doors were unleashed live in public, in a way that few could have anticipated. This was not just a personal feud. It was a collision of power, influence, and the fragile image of trust in media institutions. Public opinion teetered on the edge as Hopkins' words cut sharply, accusing Holly and Vine of hypocrisy, moral cowardice, and complicity in a system the public now sees as corrupt and self-serving. Each phrase landed with the weight of betrayal, a reminder that even the most adored figures can be exposed in moments of moral reckoning. Inside studios, producers scrambled, executives whispered urgently in corridors, and the cabinet's media advisors were left reeling, unsure how to contain a story that was now larger than life. Fans of Willoughby were left conflicted, questioning whether the television personality they had admired for decades could withstand the relentless glare of Hopkins' accusations. Vine, known for his calm demeanour and measured debates, was visibly shaken, his composure cracking as the confrontation played out in front of millions. Every phrase Hopkins delivered seemed calculated, precise, and devastating, as if she had been waiting for this moment for years, armed with an unyielding sense of moral vindication. Newsrooms across London were lit up with rapid alerts, journalists scrambling to report, analyse, and decode the statements that had already begun to reshape the national conversation. The situation escalated at a speed that left the public breathless. Tweets turned into trending storms. Comment sections erupted with vitriol and support in equal measure, and clips of Hopkins' remarks circulated endlessly, sparking debates that cut across generations, political lines, and social classes. Even political figures could not ignore the storm. Messages of support, condemnation, and strategic silence flooded the corridors of power as ministers and aides tried to gauge the potential fallout on public trust in media and leadership. Behind the cameras, a different drama was unfolding. Holly Willoughby, normally unflappable in the face of criticism, was reported to be consulting advisors, her usual poised public image under siege. Vine, long regarded as a voice of calm reason, was now navigating accusations that threatened to redefine his credibility and career. The timing could not have been more explosive. Coming just days after Hopkins' legal victory, the public interpreted her statements as a symbolic reckoning, a confrontation between entrenched media figures and a voice that dared to challenge them without fear. And yet, even as this media firestorm raged, questions began to form in the minds of millions watching at home. What had prompted Hopkins to target these figures so publicly and so deliberately? What secrets, perceived betrayals, or hidden dealings lay behind the veil of this attack? Could this moment mark a turning point not just for television personalities, but for the public's trust in the institutions they had relied on for years? The shockwaves were just beginning to ripple across the nation. Social media analytics showed unprecedented engagement, as if the entire country had paused, collectively waiting to see how Holly and Vine would respond to the humiliation and fury directed at them. The tension was palpable, the stakes enormous. Every viewer at home could feel the moral weight of what had been exposed, the arrogance of celebrity, the fragile image of authority, and the raw, unfiltered power of someone who refuses to be silenced. And as the first statements hit the newswires, insiders reported that cabinet officials were preparing contingency plans, television networks were reconsidering programming, and lawyers were on standby anticipating further fallout. The nation was witnessing more than a media feud. It was a test of courage, integrity, and public perception. Every social media post, every news clip, and every whispered speculation was feeding into a narrative of betrayal and moral confrontation that could reshape careers and reputations. But the question that hung over every conversation, every headline, every tweet was chilling in its simplicity. How far was Katie Hopkins willing to go, and what would Holly Willoughby and Jeremy Vine do next when confronted by a storm they had no way to control? The answers were not yet clear, but one thing was certain: Britain had entered a moment of unprecedented media reckoning, and no one would emerge unchanged. Could this confrontation mark the beginning of a full-scale collapse of public trust in Britain's media elites? Or is there a hidden strategy yet to be revealed that could turn the tide in Holly and Vine's favour? The morning after Hopkins' explosive public attack, the fallout intensified with every passing hour. The nation was still reeling from the confrontation, and social media remained a battlefield. Memes, heated commentary and viral clips circulated endlessly, painting a portrait of a media establishment under siege. Insiders reported a sense of panic behind studio doors. Producers, once confident in their schedules and carefully curated broadcasts, now scrambled to anticipate the next move. Emails flew across executive inboxes, urgent meetings were called, and even long-trusted publicists appeared unsettled. For Holly Willoughby, the humiliation cut deeper than a trending hashtag could reveal. Friends close to her described a profound sense of betrayal, not only from Hopkins' words, but from the awareness that her carefully crafted public persona could be so publicly dismantled in a single, devastating salvo. Jeremy Vine too struggled to regain composure. Known for his sharp wit and measured tone, he was now caught in a storm where every gesture, every statement, every pause was dissected and amplified by a nation watching closely. It was no longer a media feud. It had become a moral trial, a confrontation that asked larger questions about trust, accountability, and the fragility of public reputation. The timing of Hopkins' attack, mere days after her police clearance, could not have been more deliberate. Legal experts speculated that this was more than opportunism. It was a calculated reassertion of influence, a signal to the public that she would no longer be silenced and that her version of truth demanded attention, consequences, and reckoning. Within the media corridors, whispers began of a larger game at play. Sources hinted that Hopkins may have uncovered internal documents, unspoken agreements, and private communications that provided ammunition for her public assault. This wasn't a random confrontation, it was the exposure of systemic tensions, a peek behind the velvet curtain that normally protects Britain's media elites from public scrutiny. And yet, even as chaos spread, reactions varied sharply. Admirers of Hopkins celebrated her courage, praising her refusal to submit to the unspoken rules of celebrity politeness. Critics condemned the attack as reckless, morally opportunistic, and cruel, painting Holly and Vine as victims of a vindictive media culture that had suddenly turned upon them. Polls suggested a sharp drop in public trust toward both figures, while simultaneously raising Hopkins' profile to unprecedented levels. The narrative became one of David versus Goliath, of rebellion against entrenched authority, and of an unflinching confrontation that seemed to expose a rot the public had suspected but never seen so vividly. The moral undertones could not be ignored. Here was a woman cleared by law, standing in the court of public opinion, confronting celebrated figures and forcing an uncomfortable question upon the nation. Are those we elevate as morally trustworthy truly deserving of our admiration? Or is the truth hidden behind carefully managed images, polished personas, and cultivated media narratives? As the hours ticked by, networks struggled to contain the story. Scheduling adjustments were made, commentary panels hastily assembled, and live statements prepared, but nothing could stem the tide. Clips of Hopkins' attack were shared millions of times, each replay amplifying tension, each new analysis deepening the moral stakes. Across the UK, viewers were caught between outrage and fascination, debating not just the words spoken, but the implications for media integrity, celebrity culture, and the very nature of public accountability. Even political figures could not ignore the storm. Parliamentarians, ministers and aides watched anxiously as the debate seeped into political discourse, using it to highlight questions of trust, transparency and moral leadership. The confrontation had transcended its immediate subjects. It was now a symbol, a test of societal norms, and a flashpoint that revealed deep-seated fractures in the relationship between public figures and the people who watch them. And yet, amid the swirling chaos, a deeper question began to emerge. What had driven Hopkins to this precise moment? Was it revenge, moral conviction, or the calculated assertion of power? What secrets had she uncovered that gave her such confidence to humiliate some of the nation's most recognisable media faces in a single, unrelenting strike? Holly and Vine were left with impossible choices: how to respond without inflaming the situation further, how to preserve credibility in the eyes of a public already divided, and how to survive a storm that seemed to have no end. Publicists, advisors and confidants scrambled to craft a strategy, but every move risked adding fuel to a fire that had already grown uncontrollable. And behind the headlines, sources hinted at further revelations, whispers of private communications, and hidden confrontations yet to surface. The public could sense it. This story was far from over. Britain watched, captivated, unsettled, and divided. Every minute brought new speculation, every tweet fanned the flames, and every passing hour made the stakes feel higher. The media landscape, once predictable, now felt volatile, uncertain, and morally charged in ways that few could have imagined. The nation held its breath as the next chapter threatened to escalate further, forcing a confrontation not just of personalities, but of principles, reputations, and the public's faith in the people they trust to inform, entertain, and inspire. And as the day turned into night, the central question loomed larger than ever. Could Holly Willoughby and Jeremy Vine survive this unprecedented media onslaught? Or was this only the beginning of a cascade that could reshape their careers and the trust of a nation forever? What hidden truths lie behind Hopkins' calculated attack, and could the revelations yet to come shatter Britain's perception of its media elite completely? As night fell over the UK, the storm ignited by Katie Hopkins showed no sign of abating. The morning's chaos had morphed into a national crisis of trust, spilling far beyond the glossy studios and social media feeds. Every headline, every trending post, every viral clip became a weapon, a spotlight, and a moral reckoning all at once. Across the country, millions of viewers debated not just what had been said, but what it revealed about the media they consumed daily. Holly Willoughby, once untouchable in her poised elegance, now faced an existential moment. Insiders revealed she had spent hours in tense discussions with legal teams, advisors, and close confidants, weighing every possible response. Every word she might speak could either stem the tide or escalate the storm further. Jeremy Vine, the epitome of calm professionalism for decades, was confronting a vulnerability unseen by the public. Sources reported cracks in his composure, fleeting moments where the rehearsed neutrality he relied upon faltered under the relentless glare of Hopkins' accusations. Social media exploded in real time. The country split into factions. Some celebrated Hopkins' courage, viewing her as a fearless crusader, exposing a system of celebrity privilege and media hypocrisy, and others condemned her as merciless, cruel, and opportunistic, attacking not just Holly and Vine, but the very principle of fair public discourse. The intensity of the moment was cinematic, almost unbearable. Cabinet officials monitored the fallout, wary that this media war could influence public perception of institutions far beyond television studios. Ministers whispered about potential political implications, strategists debated narrative control, and aides feared that one misstep could transform the spectacle into a lasting scandal that reached the corridors of power. Inside the studios, production teams scrambled to manage live broadcasts, unsure how to contain a story that had grown uncontrollable. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, whispers suggested that Hopkins may have additional revelations yet to emerge. Documents, messages, or evidence that could further humiliate her targets. Every person watching sensed the tension. This was no ordinary feud, but it had become a moral reckoning. The stakes were not just reputation, but credibility, integrity, and the fragile trust between public figures and the audience. Each moment felt like a turning point. Social media commentators and journalists debated endlessly. Could Holly Willoughby and Jeremy Vine recover? Or had their credibility been irrevocably damaged? Was this the beginning of a broader exposure of media elites, or a single, explosive act that would fade with the news cycle? The narrative had evolved into a national drama, blending outrage, fear, fascination, and moral judgment. Every citizen watching was forced to ask themselves uncomfortable questions. Who can we trust when even the most familiar faces are vulnerable to public humiliation? When truth, perception, and power collide so violently, what remains of the institutions we rely upon to inform and guide us? And in the centre of this storm stood Katie Hopkins, unflinching, relentless, and unapologetic, as if daring the nation to look away. Her words, delivered with precision and vehemence, had ignited a fire that could not easily be contained. Yet even in the midst of this chaos, one question loomed larger than all others. What would Holly and Vine do next? Would they fight back, revealing secrets or truths of their own? Or would they retreat, letting the storm rage, leaving the nation to grapple with its moral and emotional consequences alone? Reports hinted at private conversations behind closed doors, emergency meetings with advisors, and late-night strategizing that could determine the next chapter. One thing was certain: the country had entered a turning point. Media trust, celebrity authority, and public perception were all under unprecedented pressure. As viewers watched the unfolding drama in real time, the tension reached a fever pitch. Every clip, every statement, every trending hashtag seemed to push the narrative closer to an inevitable climax, a moment that could reshape reputations, redefine public trust, and challenge assumptions about power and accountability in the UK. And as the night deepened, speculation mounted. Were there even more revelations waiting to surface? Was this a single confrontation or the opening salvo of a series of disclosures that could shatter careers and redefine the media landscape? Britain was on edge, captivated, anxious, and unwilling to look away. The story was far from over, and every heartbeat, every scroll, every social media notification felt like a countdown to the next explosive revelation. The nation waited with bated breath for the response, for the defence, for the moment that would define the aftermath of a historic, unforgettable confrontation. Could Katie Hopkins' campaign of exposure ultimately bring down Britain's media elite completely? Or will Holly Willoughby and Jeremy Vine find a way to turn the tables before the nation's trust is lost forever? What shocking revelation still lies hidden, waiting to ignite the next chapter of this unprecedented media battle?